Well, joining us now is the musician and former frontman of Ultravox, Midge Ure, and the Capital FM radio DJ, Jenny Cook. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us this evening. Midge Ure, what do you put the success of these British acts down to?
I think it's just down to basic raw talent. I mean, for a very small country, we punch way above our weight. We always have done. You know, you look back since kind of modern populist rock music, pop music started in the 50s right through till now. We've consistently come up with some really interesting stuff, kind of world-changing stuff. And I think that quite possibly what's left of the record industry, because it's gone through a really hard time, what's left of the record industry is now starting to focus again on finding proper talents rather than, you know, nurturing, finding things on, you know, karaoke, you know, the TV shows on a Saturday night. So I think, you know, you look at what you've just seen there, you know, Ed Sheeran, Sam Smith, and you know, Coldplay, and you know, all of those guys, they're just good talents.
And Jenny, some relatively new acts in there, but also some old established ones too. I mean, Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I mean, historically speaking, like British bands have always done really, really well compared to like American solo artists. That's always been the way that it's been. But if you look at that list there, you've got Pink Floyd, the older ones, and you've got these new younger ones that are all a bit different. On the same list are these American acts like Beyonce, like Taylor Swift, are really, really polished. But the likes of Ed Sheeran and Sam Smith, they're not so polished. They're a bit different, they're a bit unusual, and I think that's what makes the list of British acts so special and so different, is their diversity. They're not all the same thing, which is interesting.
And how have things changed, do you think, since your Ultravox days in terms of, you know, promoting bands, promoting music?
It's radically different. It's a very different world from how it was when I kind of started out. You know, there were you know, a multitude of record labels who would sign artists, who would look to sign all sorts of artists, and what they would do is if they signed, say, 100 artists in a year, you know, maybe 5 of those artists, if they became successful, would pay for the 95 that weren't. But out of the 95 that were maybe some really interesting oddities, and those oddities are what made the industry kind of change and diversify. So if it wasn't for signing the oddities, the Kate Bushes or the Peter Gabriels or whatever, you wouldn't have the interesting music that we have right now. And the problem with the industry, as it's been for the last few years, is that they've been scared or haven't had the finances to sign the oddities, to take the chance. So they've just churned out the same old stuff all the time.
Would you agree with that, Jenny, that they're not taking enough risks?
Yeah, I think that is a problem, and I think the way that things have gone recently with a lot of X Factor acts dominating the charts and stuff like that, you look at One Direction, they're probably the most commercially sort of shiny and pop out of the list there. There is a lot of that going on, but I feel like, as you were saying earlier, the likes of Ed Sheeran, he has come from that background of plugging away, you know, working really hard, busking all the time to get where he is, and he is a bit more unusual. And I think there are a new breed of pop stars that are coming through like that, but it is a lot harder for them.
But they are great raw talents. Ed Sheeran, I think, is one of the most talented characters to come out of the UK for a long time.
Yeah, and he's unusual. He's quirky, isn't he?
Yeah, he's just himself. Do you know what I mean? He hasn't really been sort of buffed up and shined by the whole industry. It's great to see. Like,
I saw him last week at the Ivor Novello Awards, and he'd just flown in from the middle of America to come to the awards, and he was flying back out that night to play a show that night in New York. Now that's the sort of thing that's really tough to do.
So
but he does it, yeah.
And how difficult is it, do you think? I mean, Ed Sheeran's made it, obviously, but how difficult is it for young bands to make it these days? Because they don't make any money from selling albums. They've got to go touring. But how do you do that if no one's heard of you?
It's a chicken and the egg situation, isn't it?
And you came across this when you were in America earlier.
I did. I've just done a 5-week tour of America where I toured out there completely alone. I had no crew, no tour manager, nobody, no adult to tell me where to go or what to do. And I did it for a reason. I did it because I speak to young musicians at these music schools, music colleges, and I realised that what I was telling them about my life and how I got signed and stuff just doesn't exist anymore. For the last 20 years, we've now spawned a generation of people who think that music just is free. It's there in the ether, and you just take it, which isn't the case. It shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately it is. So I showed, in order to talk to these kids, I went out and did this tour completely alone, videoed it, documented the entire thing, booked my own flights, booked my own hotels, booked my own car hire, drove myself all across America, dealt with the money. Oh, a horrible concept. I've never had to deal with that before.
You have to carry your own bags.
All of that, carried my own merchandise and sold my own t-shirts, did all of that stuff in order to show new artists what it might be like, the reality of what it might be like for them.
And Jenny, the bands are doing very well at the moment in Britain. Do you think that's going to continue, or is it going to be more and more difficult for people to make it?
I think in general in the music industry all over the world that's the case, where it is more difficult. But I think British bands will continue, as they have done throughout history, to do really well. I mean, that doesn't seem to have changed for a very long time, and probably will keep on going, especially the more people that manage to make it, the more people sitting at home with their guitar want to try and make it, and the more talent there is to be discovered, as long as it can be.
I think talent's always been there, and it always will be there. Just the problem is that they're sitting in bedrooms, making music that people will probably never hear.
And obviously you're so well known from Ultravox, Band Aid, etc. But what have you got planned for the rest of the year? What's on the cards
I'm
for
working
you?
harder now than I probably ever have. I'm touring constantly. I've just come back from Australia and New Zealand. I was in Poland at the weekend. I'm touring all the way through, so I've got my Breathe Again tour happening, and then early next year I'm touring with Big Country, so a pretty Scottish flavour to that too.
And you have had such an amazing career. When you look back, you've still got a long way to go, obviously, but what do you see as some of your highlights?
Oh, I think the biggest highlight for me has been allowed to carry on doing it. I mean, it's a business where, a 5-year career is actually a very good run, and I've been doing this all my life, so I'm incredibly happy about it. Highlights, standing on stage at Live Aid, I suppose, is one of them.
Oh, well, it's been fantastic to have you on the programme, Midge Ure and Jenny Cook. You as well. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us.